Fig Pudding by Ralph Fletcher. Chapter 1. Clifford Allen Abernathy III. My full name is Clifford Allen Abernathy III, after my father and grandfather, but I leave off the third, the Allen, and the ord. Call me Cliff. I'm in Mr. Beck's class at the Bradford Bridges Elementary School in Ballingsford. I've noticed lately that lots of my favorite things seem to start with B. Baseball, Baltimore's my favorite team. Basketball, bacon, blue fishing, blue slush cones, red. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and that makes me different from the other kids. Dad and Mom sure treat me different. The other kids can whoop and scream and holler like a bunch of savages. They can sneak into Mrs. Montgomery's vegetable garden and pick up all her cherry tomatoes. No big deal. They can climb trees and get sticky pine pitch smeared all over their shirts and hair. What do you expect? Dad and Mom expect more from me. I have to be Mr. Responsibility, Mr. Set a good example. On certain days, keeping the other kids out of trouble makes me feel more like a policeman than a brother. Some days it drives me nuts. Take the time when a water pipe burst down the street and made a huge mud puddle on the McLeavery's front lawn. Before I could say baby beluga, the other kids had kicked off their shoes, Teddy kept his socks on, and waded deep into the mud-brown water. I stood at the edge, yelling at them to get out, secretly wishing I could go in. When we got home, it didn't matter to Mom that my own clothes didn't have a speck of mud on them. She took one look at the other kids, sat me down as if it was my fault, and demanded, "How could you let this happen?" Don't get me wrong, being the oldest has its advantages. I don't have to wear a baseball glove somebody else stunk up with years of their own sweat. I don't have any monster big brother or evil big sister to boss me around. I get to stay up later than anyone else, and I get to hear lots of grown-up stuff the other kids never hear, like why Uncle Ray doesn't come to visit anymore. He's drinking again. Being the oldest is special, my mom is forever saying. But when you balance out the advantages with having to act like Mr. Almost Perfect and all the rest, take it from me, being the oldest is not all it's cracked up to be. Living in a family with so many people can be pretty weird, too. Ever go to bed on a cold winter night with the heat turned down and your room so cold you have to pile up a bunch of blankets on top of you? While you lie there, you mostly feel the flannel sheet and the quilt right next to you. With the other blankets, the ones added last, your body doesn't notice whether those blankets are made of wool or cotton. All you know is that they're helping keep you warm. In a crazy way, it feels like that, living in a family with so many kids. Nate, Sin, short for Cynthia, Teddy, Brad, Josh. Nate is like my closest blanket. We're less than a year apart. We share a bedroom. The other kids are my sister and brothers, but Nate is my best friend. And then there's the baby, Josh. I was almost 10 when he was born. He's okay, as babies go, but most of the time I don't pay all that much attention to him. He's like that last blanket piled on my head just before I fall asleep. We Abernathys always overdo everything, Mom likes to say. True enough. I hate going with Mom to the supermarket. It's embarrassing. We end up with 2 shopping carts overflowing with food. Mom buys the jumbo size of everything. When she cooks, she always doubles the recipe, but after supper, it's a miracle if there's any food left on the table. We Abernathys always overdo everything, but even for us, this past year has been like nothing I'd ever thought possible. Like 5 years crammed into one. With plenty of stuff I want to remember forever, and stuff I wish I could forget. I only know one way to start telling about a year like this. Take a deep breath, begin at the beginning, and push right on through until the end. Chapter 2. A Yada Yada. It started a few days before Christmas. I was sitting in the kitchen, getting ready to dig into a steaming plate of French toast Mom had just handed me, when she asked, "Where'd you cut up Josh's French toast first?" "Come on, Mom, I'm starved," I told her. "It'll just take a minute," she said. "I don't have forearms." "Oh, all right," I grumbled. Josh wasn't quite 2. I cut a piece of French toast, and he popped it into his mouth. I cut another, and he gobbled down that piece too. "Don't just swallow it," I told him. "You gotta chew or you'll get a bellyache." Josh started coughing hard. He had a bad cold. 2 fat jets of greenish snot were slowly making their way down his face from nose to mouth. He grinned up, and I tried not to look at him. It was too disgusting. Finally, I got his toast cut up and his nose wiped, and had just drowned my own French toast in syrup, when all of a sudden I heard something at the front door. "Watch your step, Grandma," a voice said. "Dad! Grandma!" A mad scramble for the front door. I jumped up first, but Teddy swerved in front of me, nearly knocking me over, and made it to the front door ahead of everyone else. "Grandma!" he screamed. Grandma Annie stood there waiting for us, a little stooped over, holding a small shopping bag. Dad stood behind her, carrying 2 suitcases. "Grandma! Grandma!" All 6 kids wrapped Grandma in a big bear hug. "Grandma! Grandma!" "Well, hello, hello!" she cried. Her face was lit up, blue eyes sparkling behind her glasses. "Hello! Look at you all! Just look at you! How tall you all are! Cliff, you've grown half a foot since last summer." "Just broke 5 feet," I told her. I was the second tallest kid in my class, 3 inches behind Melody Swift, a dorky blonde-haired girl who'd just moved from Tallahassee. "Can't keep food in the refrigerator," Mom said. "Just as it should be," Grandma told Mom. "Better spend your money on food than on doctor's bills." "I'm getting big too," Brad put in. "Yeah, but I'm bigger," Teddy yelled. "You're all simply enormous," Grandma said, tousling their hair. Josh tried to climb her leg like a squirrel. She reached down and picked him up. "Well, hello there, little monkey. Just look at that runny nose. That's quite a cold you've got, young man." "He's been sick all week," Mom sighed. "Sick," Josh said. "I'll make some chicken soup," Grandma said. She reached down and touched Sin on the back of her neck. "And how are you, darling?" "I'm good." "Santa Claus going to bring you a special present this year?" Grandma asked. "Presents! Presents!" Teddy yelled. Mom shushed him. "I wish he'd bring me a little sister," Sin said quietly. I know. Grandma stroked her cheek. 5 brothers, Sin said, and me. It must take a mountain of patience, Grandma said. "Bada goo," Josh said. Everyone laughed, but Grandma looked confused. "He's saying butter good," Nate explained. "Josh loves butter, don't you?" "Hey, Josh, tell Grandma what you want Santa Claus to bring you." "A yada yada," Josh said seriously. He sniffled and tried to wipe away his runny nose, but only smeared the stuff all over his face. "Here," Grandma said, wiping his face with a tissue. "Now what did you say?" "I want a yada yada," Josh said. Grandma looked confused again. "What's that?" she asked. "That's the thing. No one knows," I told her. "It's a mystery. Everybody's trying to figure it out." "Hey, Sin, you speak baby talk, don't you?" Nate asked. "What's he saying?" "Very funny," Sin replied. She shrugged. "It could be almost anything. Sounds a little like yellow water, or maybe little spider." Grandma asked Josh, "Do you want yellow water?" He shook his head. "Do you want a little spider?" "No." "Can you use some other words to tell us what you want?" "I want a yada yada," Josh repeated patiently. Then he pinched a fold of Grandma's loose neck skin and sort of stretched it out from her neck, let go, and pulled the skin out again, all the while grinning and saying, "Squishy, squishy, squishy." "Josh!" Mom said. She looked horrified. "Oh, now that's all right." Grandma was laughing. "Guess I am pretty squishy in certain places." She grabbed a hunk of Josh's cheek. "Squishy, squishy yourself." Dad sent me outside to fetch the rest of Grandma's stuff. I gobbled down my French toast, threw on my coat, and went outside. In the far back seat of Dad's car, I found 2 shopping bags full to bursting with presents, already wrapped. Grandma didn't have much money, but somehow she always showed up with a ton of presents for everybody. It was clothes, mostly, but comfortable stuff you wanted to wear right away. I carried the presents into the den where Grandma would be sleeping. Everyone was in the living room, crowded around the Christmas cactus. "Look at all the buds," Grandma said, bending forward to get a close look. She had given us the cactus a few years before. It looked like an ordinary plant, with thick, green leaves. In mid-December, the leaves started budding up with bright pink balls, and by Christmas it was always full of beautiful pink blossoms. "Look, they're opening up!" Teddy shouted. "Hey, we can hear you," Dad told Teddy. We're right here." "Must be that time of year," Grandma said. The whole house looks beautiful. Say, where's the tree? I'm going to buy it this afternoon, Dad told her. Now, how about a nice hot cup of coffee? I'd love some. She rubbed her hands together. Dad took her black coat and got her seated on the couch. Sin and Brad snuggled next to her. Oh, thank you. It's just so good to be here, and there's so much to do. I'd like to start my holiday baking today, if that's all right. I don't see why not, Mom said. Thought I'd start by making some of my stolen. Naughty Grandma. Grandma stole something, Sin said with a shy smile. I stared over at Sin. She hardly ever cracked a joke. Grandma laughed out loud and gave her a quick tickle. Just then Teddy dragged the 2 bags of Grandma's presents into the living room. Teddy was the family maniac. Christmas made him worse than ever. Hey, can we open these presents? Teddy yelled. Can we, Grandma? Teddy, put those down, Mom said. She took the bags away from him. Teddy, come over here and help me make your shopping list, Mom said. She patted the cushion next to her. What are you going to buy, Grandma? Let's see, Grandma said. I'll need some flour, yeast, brown sugar, regular sugar, confectioner's sugar. Sugar! Teddy yelled. Yes, and nuts and cherries. Cherries! Teddy again. Teddy, we're right here, Mom reminded him. You don't have to yell. I'll need lots of butter. Butter goo, Josh put in. Oh, almost forgot, Grandma said. Sweat for the birds. Sweat, I asked. What's that? Fat. Birds need extra fat when it's this cold. We've got to keep feeding them or they'll freeze. You won't start baking without us, will you? I asked. It just killed me that Grandma Annie was visiting, but I still had to go to school. It wasn't fair. Heavens no, Grandma retorted. How could I? I've got a ton of baking. I'm going to need all the helpers I can get. Can I come to the store with you? Sin asked. Please? You have to go to school, young lady, Mom said. You all do. Look at the clock. Get a move on. The bus will be here in 5 minutes. But I want to go shopping with Grandma. I'm not going shopping, Grandma said. Your father said he'd be nice enough to go shopping for me. I'm going to take off my shoes and put these old feet up. All this travel and excitement has worn me out. We went off to school. I was in 5th grade, Nate in 4th, Sin in 3rd, Teddy in 2nd, Brad in 1st. I sat next to Nate on the bus, and the whole way I thought about Grandma. Grandma Annie needed plenty of rest, because she was really old. 79 years old. When she was 18, she got a job working at Feline's department store in Boston. She played on the Feline's women's basketball team. Now she had a slow and stooped-over kind of walk. I couldn't imagine her dribbling or shooting or guarding another player, but she had been one of the best players on the team. Dad showed me an old newspaper clipping that said, Ann Sullivan plays the toughest defense in the league. Back in the 1920s, only men could vote, no women allowed. Grandma had marched on the Boston Common with thousands of other women who were mad about that. They wanted women to have the same right to vote. Grandma was proud. She had helped to change that law. Annie Sullivan got married and had 8 children. Mom was the youngest. Annie's husband, James, had died on Mom's 13th birthday. My mother has always had a backbone like a rod of Bethlehem steel, Mom liked to say about Grandma. I guess she needed that strong backbone, being a widow when 4 sons, my uncles, went overseas to fight in World War II. Now Grandma Annie lived alone. She had lots of people who loved her, tons of relatives begging her to spend a holiday with them. I always thought it was amazing, almost a miracle, that most years she chose to come to our house. I came home from school in a bad mood. Mr. Beck's nickname was the Bomber because he liked to drop tons of homework at the last minute. Well, today he lived up to his nickname. Here, it was one day before Christmas vacation, and he gave us 8 pages of math, 2 chapters in science, plus a page of homonyms and antonyms. They'll be fun, he promised. Ha! I lugged my backpack into the kitchen. There's someone sitting at our table. Uncle Billy! I cried. Silly Billy! Nate yelled. He raced over and practically jumped the man. Pick on someone your own size, Uncle Billy said, pretending to be scared. Look at the lot of you. Hi, 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 Brad said, jumping up on his lap. Uncle Billy was about 50, with big shoulders and a big bald head. Brad rubbed the bald top of Uncle Billy's head and grinned. happened to your hair?" "Sold it to an Englishman for $1,000,000, he said." "Really?" Fred asked, serious. Brad was the most gullible person on the planet. He believed anything. If you told him you had a stegosaurus chained up in the backyard, his first reaction would be, "Does he bite?" "You did not sell it," Sin said, smiling. I did. Cross my heart and hope to die." Uncle Billy could imitate bird calls, tell jokes, and speak Spanish, as well as Arabic and Swahili. He'd learned those languages during his 20 years in the Navy. He could do dozens of amazing card tricks and just as many tricks with his hands, including where he clearly counted 11 fingers and thumbs. Uncle Billy never explained his tricks. He never gave away his secrets. He'd fought in World War II and in Korean War II. Nate was forever trying to get him to tell us war stories. But what I loved most was hearing him talk about the old baseball players, Ted Williams, Jimmy Fox, the great DiMaggio brothers, Joe and Dom. He liked to sing, "He's better than his brother Joe, Dominic DiMaggio." "So, what do you ragamuffins want for Christmas this year?" Uncle Billy asked. "Cliff, who's a choo-choo train?" Nate sneered. "So what?" I shot back. I cleared my throat. "Yeah, well, I think I might start collecting vinyl train pieces. You know, as a hobby." I was 11 years old, and part of me wondered if I wasn't too old for a train set. But I did want it something fierce. I'd seen it in a store, a vinyl train with a bright light in the front of the engine as it thundered around the track, and real smoke, oily and metallic, spilling out the top. If I started thinking about it in bed, I'd get so excited I couldn't fall asleep. "Aha! How about you, Nate?" "Microscope," he said, "or chemistry set." The mad scientist Sin giggled. "Watch out," Nate said. "I'll blow up your room." "Go blow up yourself first," Sin replied. "Easy there," Uncle Billy said. "How about you, Cynthia?" "A kitten," she said. "Don't hold your breath," I snorted. "Hadn't you heard? Dad hates cats. He's allergic." "He's not." "He's allergic to the idea of having a cat," I said. "Dad told me to put it on my list," Sin said, raising her nose at me. "I also want a transistor radio." "Rock'em sock'em robots," Teddy yelled, "and boxing gloves, and a road racing set, and walkie-talkies, and—" "His list is already 2 pages long," Sin told Billy. "Mom already said no to the boxing gloves." "Did not!" Teddy yelled. "Easy there, Ted," Uncle Billy said. "How about you, Brad?" "I want a baseball glove." "Attaboy!" Uncle Billy touched him lightly on the arm. "I want a yada-yada," Josh said quietly. "And what in tarnation is that?" Uncle Billy asked. "That's just it," I said. "We can't find anybody who knows what a yada-yada is." "Sarsaparilla succotash," Uncle Billy said, snapping his fingers twice. "You know what? I think I just may have an idea. I believe that a yada-yada is a kind of talking parrot, nearly extinct, found on the tiny island of Mascugat, just off the southernmost tip of Madagascar." "Uncle Billy!" Sin frowned at him. "You're being silly." "Well, I have read that the people of Kathmandu call yo-yo a yada-yada," he said. "It's a kind of yo-yo that makes a strange music when you—" "Uncle Billy!" Sin warned. "I'm going to tell Grandma on you." "Where is Grandma?" Fred asked. "Upstairs taking a nap," Uncle Billy said. "She said you can go wake her when you get home." "It's the first true thing you've said," Sin told him. Everyone started racing upstairs. "Up, up!" Josh said, lifting his arms to me. I lifted him and started carrying him up the stairs. "I want a yada-yada," Josh whispered. I know, but what is a yada-yada?" He turned to look at me. His eyes were all watery. His nose was running real bad, little faucets of greenish goop. "A yada-yada," Josh said, as if that explained everything. A mystery. "All right, everybody wake up and die right," Grandma said when she came down to the kitchen. "I'm ready," Teddy cried. "We're making a skull-in," Grandma announced. "Everybody with me? Click." Grandma took my right hand in hers and gave it a squeeze. Her hands are amazing. One time, when she fell asleep on the couch, I spent about 15 minutes studying her hands. The dark veins slowly throbbing under skin that looked thin and clear as tissue paper. Her hands made me think of driftwood, old and pale and worn smooth. They were stained brown in places, but she still had one strong grip. I'm doing the flour, right? I asked. Whenever Grandma made stone, it was my job to sift the flour. 7 cups, plus a teaspoon of salt. Sifting flours made my hands ache, but it had to be done just right. I felt kind of proud, knowing that Grandma trusted me to do it. Right. Sift that flour good. I want it light and fluffy. Teddy? I'm doing the yeast, Teddy cried. No, you're not, Nate shot back. I'm mixing the yeast. That's not fair, Teddy screamed. He always gets to do the yeast. Right, that's my job, Nate said. Here, Grandma said, giving Teddy a box of raisins. I need you to count up 50 raisins. Put them in this bowl. 50. 1 raisin for every state in this country. You can't count that high, Nate muttered. Can too, Teddy yelled. Never mind about the raisins, Grandma told Nate. You pay attention to the yeast. Remember, the water has to be warm, not too hot, not too cold. Sin was using a hand beater to beat an egg. Whip that egg up nice and smooth, Grandma said. What are you doing, Grandma? Sin asked. Scalding this milk and keeping an eye on the rest of you. Me too, Josh said, pulling on Grandma's apron. All right, Grandma said. How else are we going to get these walnuts chopped up? She gave Josh a pile of walnuts and a block of wood for breaking the nuts into smaller pieces. That was a tradition. Whenever Grandma made stone, the youngest kid always got to smash up the walnuts. Josh took the wood and started pounding like a madman, as if he wanted to pulverize each nut right down to dust. When we finished making the dough, Grandma put it in a big bowl, covered it with a towel, and put it on the stove. It would take an hour for the dough to rise. Teddy, Brad, and Sin dragged Grandma into the living room and pushed her back onto the couch. Brad climbed onto her lap. Story, story, they yelled. Tell us a story, Grandma. All right, Grandma said. Cliff, Nate, you boys come up here. Don't tell me you're too old for one of your grandma's stories, because I know you're not. I ever tell you about the first time I went on a vacation? You know, I didn't get a vacation until I was 41 years old. How come? I asked. We couldn't afford it when I was younger. We had to spend every cent we had on rent and food. Were you poor, Grandma? Sin asked. I don't know, she said. She stopped and seemed to think about it. Maybe a little. Being poor is nothing to be ashamed of. We had food, we had clothes, we had beds to sleep in. We just didn't have anything left over for vacations and such. But on my 41st birthday, my brother Paul took me out to Arizona, to the desert. One morning, we were driving through some little town, and all of a sudden, a policeman stopped the traffic in both directions. At first, we couldn't see why he was stopping us, so we got out of the car to find out what the problem was. You'll never believe what we saw. What? We saw a family of tarantulas crossing the road. Long as I live, I'll never forget the sight of that big policeman with a whistle in his mouth, holding up both hands so that those tarantulas could make it safely across. Aw, come on, Grandma, Nate said. He grinned and gave her a skeptical look. You don't believe me? She asked. I do, Brad said. How many were there? I asked. 10. 10 tarantulas. No, wait. She closed her eyes and tried to remember. 11. There were 11 because the last one had a baby riding on her back. Were they big? Brad asked. Big and hairy, she said. One hairier than the next. Ah, Grandma, Nate said. You're fibbing. She's not fibbing, Sin said, snuggling close to Grandma. She's not, Teddy yelled. Grandma shushed him. Think I'd make up something like that? She asked. Yeah, Nate smiled. When I was little, you used to tell the story about those 5 bad guys who kidnapped you, and you had a gun but only 1 bullet. So you told them to line up, and then you shot them all with 1 bullet. I know that's not true. Did I say that? Grandma looked surprised. Well, maybe that would stretch the truth a little, but every word of the tarantula story is true. Tell us a story about when you were little, Sen said. Did you ever get in trouble? Sometimes, Grandma admitted. I got in trouble with the Iceman once. The Iceman? I asked. Back when I was little, we didn't have refrigerators like we do every day. We had something called an ice box, and every couple days the Iceman would come around. He had a wooden cart pulled by a horse. A big block of ice was on that cart. We'd buy ice cream from the Iceman. He'd use his ice pick to chip off a chunk of ice, and then he'd carry it up and put it in our ice box. "Aw, come on, Grandma," Nate said. "It's true," she said. "Didn't it melt?" I asked. "After a while. When it melted, we'd have to buy another piece of ice. My friend and I loved to sneak up and spy on the iceman. While he loaded up his ice and carried it up to our apartment, we'd run over to his cart." She dropped her voice to a whisper. "We'd steal little chunks of ice. And one summer day, a wicked hot day in August, the iceman caught me. He caught me with a piece of ice in my hands." "Did you get in trouble?" Teddy asked, smiling. "He dragged me by my ear up to our apartment and told my father what I'd done." "Did you get spanked on your bottom?" Brad asked. "'Deed I did. My father gave me a licking I'll never forget." "Did he use his hand?" Nate asked. "No, took off his belt." Grandma said. "Then his pants fell down." Nate giggled. "He smacked me 3 times on the bottom, and I never stole another thing in my life." "Did you cry?" Sin asked. "You bet I did." Grandma looked at Nate. "Does that story sound true?" "Well, yeah," Nate said. "That one sounds a lot truer than the one about tarantulas." "Did I ever tell you about the time a swarm of honeybees came down our chimney?" Grandma asked. "Aw, come on, Grandma." When the dough had risen, Grandma made us all wash our hands before we got to pound down the warm dough. We rolled it out, added the nuts and raisins and cherries, rolled it up again, and tucked the loaves into loaf pans so the dough could rise one more time. Finally, the stolen went into the oven. Within minutes, this incredible smell spread through the house. The bread had to be eaten right away, within 24 hours, or it would start getting stale. Those first slices of stolen were so good, it took the words out of our mouths. All we could do was eat. Nobody spoke. I finished 2 thick slices and pushed my plate back at Grandma for seconds. Just then, the kitchen door flew open, letting in a blast of freezing cold air. "Dad!" Teddy yelled. First, Uncle Billy and Dad came to the kitchen, pulling the bottom stump of a Christmas tree. Then a mass of green branches appeared, and last of all, Mom, red-faced and smiling, holding the top of the tree. Dad stood the tree in the middle of the kitchen, so we could all take a look at it. "Ain't she a beauty?" Dad asked. At that, Teddy jumped up, whacked his finger at Dad, and chanted loudly, Ain't, don't say ain't. Your mother will faint and your father will fall in a bucket of paint." "Shh," Mom told him. With the door shut, we got our first strong whiff of that piney smell. Grandma's eyes widened at the sight of the tree. "What do you think, Mother?" Mom asked Grandma. "Well, Lisa, I do not believe I've ever seen a more lovely tree in my entire life," Grandma said. It sounded funny, hearing my mother's real name spoken out loud. She walked around the tree, then her eyes narrowed. She looked at my father and asked in a low voice, "How much did it cost?" "A lot," Dad admitted. "How much?" Grandma persisted. $7, Dad said with a straight face. A lie. I had bought Christmas trees to Dad before. I knew very well that a tree like this would cost at least $20, maybe more. $7, Grandma explained. "The robbers." She shook her head and walked around to take another slow look at it. "I guess the price of everything is going up these days. And it is a lovely tree, but $7? If that isn't a highway robbery, I don't know what is." The stolen, like any good food in our house, didn't last very long. Grandma promised she'd make another batch, but the next day she made pinwheel cookies instead. She had a tray ready to go in the oven when I noticed Josh curled up under the kitchen table, lying on his blanket, sound asleep. That seemed strange. He'd already taken his nap. I touched his forehead and, boy, did it feel hot. I called to Mom. "Feel that! He's got a fever." Mom took his temperature. When she saw the thermometer, drank the blood from her face. "Holy Mother of Mercy!" Mom yelled to Grandma. 105! "Mother, am I reading that right?" "Call the doctor," Grandma said. "You don't fool around with a fever like that." Grandma carried Josh upstairs to Mom's bed, while Mom called Dr. Wentworth. The doctor came over to the house, did a quick examination of Josh, and stood there, shaking his head. "Don't like it one bit," said Dr. Wentworth. He was a tall, bony man with huge hands, and he had this odd way of squeezing his hands when he talked. First his left hand squeezed his right hand, then his right squeezed his left. "Cliff, wait in the kitchen for your father," Mom said. So I sat with Uncle Billy in the kitchen, playing double solitaire. I could tell he was letting me win. He was making too many dumb mistakes. We had just started a fourth game when Dad walked into the kitchen carrying 2 big bags of groceries. "Josh is really sick," I told him. "Dr. Wentworth's up with him right now." Dad practically dropped the groceries onto the table and raced upstairs with me right behind. I stood in the bedroom doorway, feeling Nate and Sin breathing and Teddy breathing behind me. Dr. Wentworth was bent over Josh, listening with his stethoscope, while Mom stroked Josh's forehead with a wet face cloth. "What is it?" Dad asked Dr. Wentworth. "That's the thing. I just plain don't know, and I'd be a liar if I pretended I did," Dr. Wentworth sighed, straightened up, and stood there rubbing his hands. "Looks like some sort of respiratory infection. Fever's still climbing, and his heartbeat's a little irregular. Not much, but enough to worry me. I don't like that." "Well, what do you think?" Dad asked. Dr. Wentworth paused again and bit his lower lip hard. "Don't want to alarm you folks, but I think we'd better take him in to Good Sam." I knew what that meant. Good Samaritan Hospital. "Good Sam!" Mom cried. "Just to be on the safe side," Dr. Wentworth said. Dad and Mom looked at each other, and down at Josh. Dr. Wentworth had delivered all of the babies in our family, including Josh. His words carried a lot of weight. "All right, Dad said. "Let's go." "Can I come?" I asked. As soon as I spoke, the other kids crowded on Dad, talking all at once. "Yeah, can I? Please, can I? I want to come." "No, you kids stay here with Uncle Billy," Dad said. "We'll be back soon. Cliff, you help your uncle," Mom said. She put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm counting on you." In 2 minutes flat, Dad, Mom, Grandma, and Dr. Wentworth had bundled up Josh and were carrying him out the front door. For supper, Uncle Billy baked a pizza shaped like a Christmas tree. He got Teddy and Brad decorating with green and black olive slices, red and green peppers, pickles, and pepperonis all smothered with grated cheese. It looked terrific when it came out of the oven, but I couldn't finish even one slice. Uncle Billy let us all stay up until Mom and Dad came home that night. We stood at the big front window, watching for cars. Finally, at 8:30, Nate spotted our car. We watched Dad and Mom and Grandma get out and walk towards the house. No Josh. The door opened. They came inside, and for a moment they stood there looking at us, looking at them. I got a funny feeling in my gut. "Where's he?" I asked. "He's going to be all right," Dad said. "His fever's come down a little. He's sleeping right now. That's what he needs." "But where is he?" "He's in the hospital," Mom said. "That's where he needs to be right now." "But when can he come home?" Nate asked. "Probably not for at least 4 or 5 days," Mom said. She took a deep breath. "Right now, it doesn't look like he'll be home for Christmas." "Not home for Christmas?" Sin cried. "But that's not fair." "The most important thing is that he's going to be all right," Mom said softly. She hugged Sin against her. "I think we can go see him tomorrow morning." No one spoke for a moment. "Can we all come?" Sin asked. "Yeah, sure," Dad said. For the first time, he smiled a little. "We'll all go together." Christmas Eve morning, at 8:30, all of us except Grandma Annie and Uncle Billy jammed into the car. Good Samaritan Hospital was 10 minutes away. I'd always thought of Good Sam as a happy place where mothers went to have their babies. Every kid in our family had been born there. It felt strange going to visit someone who was really sick. We walked through the main door to the big desk with the words "Visitors" over it. A woman behind the desk shook her head firmly when she saw all of us. "You can't all go up there," she said, still shaking her head. "There's a limit of 2 visitors at a time." "I understand," Dad tried to explain, "but Dr. Wentworth said 2 visitors at a time," the woman repeated. She pointed at Brad and Teddy. "No small children. Hospital regulations. I don't make them." Just when it looked like she and Dad were going to get into an argument, Dr. Wentworth walked into the waiting room. He spoke in a whisper to the woman. She sighed, shook her head some more, and looked away. Dr. Wentworth motioned for us to follow him. We got into an elevator. Mom gave Dr. Wentworth a small smile, but he didn't smile back. "I called in early this morning," he said. "Josh's fever is still running high. I want you all to understand that ahead of time. He's a very sick child." Nobody said anything the rest of the way up. We followed Dr. Wentworth into pediatrics, a huge room with lots of cribs. I counted 16 of them along the walls. There was Josh. He was in the middle of his crib, still, lying on his stomach. His eyes were open. The skin on his face looked sweaty and red. He just lay still, too weak to even lift his head off the crib sheet. "Mama," he said in a croaking sort of voice. "Daddy." "Hello, honey," Mom whispered. "We've all come to see you." "Mommy, Daddy," Josh croaked. Mom reached in and scooped him up. Josh lay against her shoulder. She rocked him, closed her eyes, humped him, smiling with only her mouth. Dad whispered to Josh and rubbed his back. I moved around so I could see Josh's face. "Josh," I whispered. "Hi, Joshy," Teddy said. "Josh, you a good boy," Sin said, touching his cheek. Brad lifted himself up on tiptoes so he could give Josh a quick kiss. Josh stayed very still. Only his eyes moved, lighting on each one of our faces. He knew we were there, and I think he was glad of it, but he couldn't even manage a smile. In a few minutes, a nurse came over to the crib. "I think we'd better let Josh try to sleep," she said. "All right," Mom said. The nurse took Josh from her arms and put him back into the crib. Nobody spoke. The nurse put Josh into his belly. He just lay there without moving. "Mommy, Daddy," he said softly. "Bye, Josh," Mom said, smiling and trying not to cry. "Yes, he needs to sleep," Dr. Wentworth said. We started to leave, but Mom stopped at the door. "I want to stay," she said. "There's really nothing you can do," Dr. Wentworth said. I know, Mom said, "but it would just make me feel better to be with him. Maybe he'll sleep better knowing I'm nearby." "It would be all right," the nurse said. "We could set up a little cot for you if you want to lie down." "All right," Dad said. He gave Mom a kiss. Call if there's any change." The rest of us walked out, past the other rooms, past the nurses, went down the elevator, filed past the lady at the visitor's desk. Nobody spoke. Outside Good Sam, Dad talked to Dr. Wentworth for a minute. As soon as Brad got back into the car, he started to cry. "I want Josh," he said. "He's going to be all right," Dad said. He touched the steering wheel and gripped it hard. "He's going to be all right. He's going to be all right." The house stayed quiet. Grandma sat by the fireplace, knitting. Everybody else, except me, sat around watching TV. I went up to my room and sorted baseball cards, thumbing through a big stack, looking for all stars. Later, I went down past Dad and Mom's bedroom, and I could hear Dad talking in a low voice on the phone. A friend, Larry, called me to invite me over to his house. "Can't," I said. "My baby brother's real sick. He's at Good Sam." Boy, did it sound strange saying such serious words. "He's at Good Sam," came out of my mouth. It scared me. "Oh, I'm sorry," Larry said. Larry sounded more confused than sorry. A moment later, we both hung up. I wish we could have talked longer, but I didn't know what to say. Late in the afternoon, Mom came home. Josh was sleeping and could not be disturbed. We couldn't go back to the hospital until 8 o'clock. That news sent a chill through the house. It was starting to get dark outside when Grandma called everyone to the kitchen. "Under the circumstances," she said, "I thought we might need a family meeting. Now, we're all sad about Josh, but there's no sense moping around like it's the night before doomsday. He's right where he needs to be, and we need to get things ready around here." "Grandma's right," Mom put in. "They're taking good care of Josh. But there's a lot that needs to get done right here. I'm not as young as I used to be. Can't do it on my own," Grandma said. "I'm going to need some help." She looked at me hard. "We're going to make another batch of stolen. Cliff, can I count on you to help?" For a moment, I didn't answer. That word, stolen, hung in the air, and it sounded exactly like stolen. Josh, 22 months old, stolen from us on Christmas Eve. "I guess," I sighed. Making bread was about the last thing I felt like doing. "Come on, then," Grandma retorted. "Let's get moving. Get the bag of flour, the unopened one, from the pantry." With a great effort, I pushed myself off my seat and shoved it into the pantry. "Come on," Grandma called after me. Last time I looked, this was still Christmas Eve, and I don't have too many more left, let me tell you. At my age, everyone counts. Come on, all of you put your stuff on this table. Shake a leg. Let's get organized. Sin, eggs, and a bag of sugar. Nate, get the yeast. Teddy, see if you can find me 2 sticks of butter in the fridge." Without a word, Teddy went to fetch the butter. "Brad?" "Cherries?" he said meekly, looking up. "Cherries it is," she said loudly. "And the raisins. And the walnuts. Can you carry all that?" Then to Mom, "Lisa, where did I put that cup measure?" Within minutes, the table was covered with ingredients. That's more like it," Grandma said. "All right, everybody knows what to do. Go to it." "But, Grandma," Sin said, "who's going to mash the nuts?" Sin pointed to the bag of walnuts, unopened, sitting on the table. Grandma cleared her throat. "Brad, why don't you chop the walnuts?" Grandma said, "when you're finished with cherries and raisins." "No," Brad said. "Look down. I can't." "Why not?" "I don't want to," Brad said. "Well, how about you, Teddy?" Grandma asked. "Would you do it?" But Teddy hesitated. He shook his head. There was a short pause. "Well, maybe just for today, your Uncle Billy can chop the nuts." Grandma said. "Bill, think you can manage that?" "Uncle Billy can't mash the nuts," Sin told Grandma quietly. "That's the baby's job. Only Josh can mash the nuts." Sin looked down. For a moment, I thought she would cry. Everyone stayed quiet. I tried hard not to look at her, or at the unopened bag of walnuts. Finally, Grandma spoke. "Young lady, you're right, as usual," she said. "That's Josh's job, and nobody should do it but him. But here's my idea. How about this time we'll leave out the nuts? What do you say?" Sin looked up and nodded seriously. "Anybody object to that?" Pause. "Good," Grandma said. She put the walnuts back to the cabinet. She looked relieved. That solves the problem. The dough rose, got pounded down, got made into loaves, and rose again. When Grandma put the loaves into the oven, it wasn't 15 minutes before that yeasty smell had taken over the house again. After supper, I hung my stocking over the fireplace. Uncle Billy could put out a piece of pie for Santa Claus and some nice carrots for the reindeer. But instead of going to bed, I piled into the cars along with everyone else and headed back to Good Sam. We took 2 cars this time, because Grandma Annie and Uncle Bill came too. The lady at the visitor's desk nodded wearily at us and motioned to the elevator. Dr. Wentworth met us just outside pediatrics. We heard inside. Josh was sitting up. The skin on his face still looked hot and red, and his curls were sweaty, but his eyes looked much brighter. "Mommy, Daddy!" he cried in a clear voice. "Well, hello!" Mom said. She lifted him out and turned to Dr. Wentworth. "He's better, isn't he?" "Much better. Looks to me like he's turned the corner. The temperature's come down a lot. Boy, that was some kind of nasty infection he had. Never saw anything like it. He had me worried, but I think he's going to be all right. He's a skinny little feller, but he's a fighter." Uncle Billy sidled up to Josh, tickled under his chin, and started playboxing with him. "A fighter, are you? Well then, put up your dukes. Put up your dukes." Josh grinned. He grinned at each of us. Mom passed him to Dad. Dad swung Josh around like he was waltzing with him. "Easy does it," Dr. Wentworth said. "He's still running a fever." "Can't he come home with us?" Sin asked Dr. Wentworth. "Please? That would be the best present of all." "I'm sorry, no," Dr. Wentworth said. "He really needs to be here at least 2 more days, so we need to watch him closely. But he's going to be all right. That's the main thing. He'll be home before you know it." Mom and Dad took turns holding and hugging Josh. Then Grandma Annie hugged him. "You had us all mighty worried, you skinny little chicken, you," she told Josh. "Hey, can I take him for a walk?" I asked after a minute. "He must hate being cooped up in that crib." "I don't know," Mom said doubtfully, but Dr. Wentworth nodded at her. "Well, all right, but not too far. Stay inside this room." When she handed Josh to me, he felt light as a bird. The other kids crowded around, touching his fingers and feet, jabbering at him all at once. Teddy and Brad started singing, "We wish you a Merry Christmas," in a soft, funny way, suddenly bringing their faces close to Josh's on the word wish. Josh squirmed with delight. We all joined in. "We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas." The 6 of us walked toward the far end of the room, where there's a door, half open. Inside, we see 2 sets of bunk beds, each with a small wooden ladder leading up to the top bunk. All of a sudden, Josh started gasping. He was pointing at the wooden ladder. I could feel his whole body trembling with excitement. "A yada yada!" he cried. "A yada yada!" Nate, Sin, Teddy, Brad, and I stood there staring stupidly at the ladder. "A little ladder!" we all said in unison. "A little ladder!" Josh beamed at me and at everyone else. Nate, Teddy, and Brad started laughing and raced back to where the grown-ups were still talking to Dr. Wentworth. They dragged them back to the little room so Josh could repeat it again. "I want a yada yada," he said, pointing at one of the little wooden ladders. "A little ladder." Sin said with a big smile. See? That's what he's been trying to tell us all along. He wants a little ladder for Christmas. Well, for heaven's sake, Mom said, shaking her head. She took Josh from me and passed him over to Grandma Annie. What on earth does a kid that age want a ladder for? Uncle Billy wondered. We have to get him one, I whispered to Dad, pulling him aside. We have to, Dad, really. Not tonight, we can't, Dad said. The stores are all closed. It's Christmas Eve. Wait a second, Clifford, Uncle Billy said. Dad, give me a second here. Closed his eyes, rubbed his chin. At that moment, I half expected him to say something silly, but he didn't. You've got power tools, don't you? Some, Dad said. Any lumber down in the basement? Some 2x4s, but you're not. Oh, I am, Uncle Billy said. He clapped his hands loudly together, and the sound pop echoed through the hospital room. His eyes had a bright, devilish gleam. We can make that little ladder. Build it ourselves. Tonight? Dad asked, for heaven's sake. Man, it's 9 o'clock. You're crazy. I've been called that, and a lot worse than that, Billy replied with a smile that showed all his teeth. You got sandpaper? I got any wood stain? You are serious, Dad said, starting to grin himself. Can you really build it? We can build it, Uncle Billy corrected him. He walked over to inspect the little ladder. Sure, something like this should be easy. Piece of cake. I'm helping, Teddy announced. Me too, Nate said. Can I help, please? I asked. I'm taking a shop in school, and I want to help too, Sin said. Dad looked at Uncle Billy, then at Mom. They were smiling. Dad shook his head. You kids should go to bed, but I've got a funny feeling you wouldn't be able to fall asleep anyway, Dad said. All right, we'll build the ladder for Josh, even if it takes us all night. He let out a cheer. Shh, Mom said. This is a hospital. All right, everyone, say goodbye to Josh, Dad said. Then to Mom, we're going to need us a couple of pots of strong coffee. We went home and crowded into the basement. There, under Uncle Billy's expert direction, we spent the next 3 hours making a ladder. Nate and I took turns cutting with the power saw, but everyone helped. We spent the time measuring, planning, cutting, drinking coffee or hot chocolate, fitting, adjusting, eating stolen apple pie, recutting, singing, sweeping, laughing, sanding, telling stories, wiping, imagining Josh's reaction, staining, admiring. It got later and later, 10, 11, way past midnight, but nobody seemed to get tired, not even Grandma. I felt as if I could have stayed up all night. That's one heck of a ladder, Uncle Billy said when we were done. And it was. A gleaming piece of furniture, about 3.5 feet high, with 4 evenly spaced rungs. Teddy tried it out, and pronounced it fit to climb. We brought it upstairs so Grandma could put a bright blue and white ribbon bow on each rung. Not sure why he needs a little ladder, Mom says, and I'm half afraid he's going to fall off and break his neck. But if that's what he wants, that's what he's going to get. Christmas morning, 8 o'clock sharp. I was eager to open my presents, but more eager to see Josh's reaction. I jumped into my clothes, and we headed back to Good Sam. We all carried the ladder into the pediatric ward. Sin in front, me and Brad on one side, Nate and Teddy on the other. Josh was awake. When he saw the ladder, he pulled himself into a standing position and pointed, eyes wide, mouth open in astonishment, grinning so hard that I thought his cheeks might crack right off. A yada yada! He cried. A yada yada!